There are moments in life when it feels like heaven went silent. You prayed, you believed, you waited, and still something slipped through your fingers. A relationship faded, an opportunity closed, a dream you carried in your spirit was buried under disappointment. You told yourself, it's gone, it's too late, I missed my season. But hear this clearly today, God does not lose track of what belongs to you. What you call loss, God calls process. What you call delay, God calls development. What you buried in tears, God marked for resurrection. You may have lost time, energy, money, or confidence, but you did not lose God's promise over your life. Heaven keeps perfect records, and God is a master at restoration. The enemy tried to convince you that your best days are behind you. Life tried to break your faith through pain and pressure. But even now, while you're questioning yourself, God is quietly rebuilding what was torn down. He is restoring your strength where you were weak, your joy where you were wounded, and your hope where you almost quit. This is not just about getting something back, it's about getting it back better, wiser, and stronger. God doesn't restore you to who you were. He restores you to who you were always meant to become. What was lost will return with purpose. What was stolen will come back with increase. And what you thought was over, God is saying, I'm just getting started. There is a dangerous lie the enemy whispers when something is taken from you. He says, you'll never recover from this. He says, what you lost was your peak. He says, that was your only chance. And if you listen long enough, you begin to grieve not just what was taken, but the future you think died with it. But today, that lie is being confronted by a higher truth. God does not restore you to the level of your loss. He restores you beyond it. When God steps into a broken situation, He never comes empty-handed. He doesn't arrive to merely compensate. He comes to transform. Human restoration replaces what was missing. Divine restoration redefines what is possible. What you lost was real, and God does not minimize your pain, but He also does not allow your pain to have the final word. Loss is not the end of your story. It is the doorway through which God reveals His power to exceed expectations. You may have lost something valuable: time, trust, opportunity, momentum, identity. And you replay it over and over in your mind, asking yourself where it went wrong. But what if I told you that God allowed the loss because the version of you connected to it had reached its limit? What if what you lost could only take you so far, and God needed it out of the way to give you something that could carry the weight of your next season? Sometimes God subtracts so He can expand. Sometimes He removes what you relied on so you can discover what He placed inside you. You thought you lost security, but God was developing faith. You thought you lost control, but God was teaching trust. You thought you lost favor, but God was preparing influence. What left your hands did not leave God's plan. God restores with insight. When what comes back arrives, it doesn't come naive. It comes wiser. It comes stronger. It comes with discernment and depth. You won't repeat the same mistakes, not because you're afraid, but because you've grown. You don't just get another chance. You get a better capacity to steward what's coming. That's why God doesn't rush restoration. He waits until you are ready to hold what you once dropped. And here's the part that will stretch your faith. Sometimes what God restores doesn't look like what you lost. You're waiting for the same thing, but God is bringing a greater thing. You're asking Him to rewind time, but God is pressing fast forward. You're praying for replacement, but God is preparing upgrade. The old thing was familiar, but the new thing will be fruitful. The old thing met a need, but the new thing fulfills a calling. Think about this. If God restored you exactly to where you were, you'd still be vulnerable to the same collapse. But when He restores beyond, He builds you on a stronger foundation. He adds wisdom where there was ignorance. He adds patience where there was haste. He adds discernment where there was emotion. What comes back is fortified. The enemy wanted the loss to break you. God allowed it to build you. The enemy wanted shame to silence you. God used it to deepen your authority. Because once you've lost something and survived, fear no longer controls you. Once you've been stripped and still stood up, you realize your strength was never in what you had. It was in who God made you to be. You didn't lose everything. You lost what could be lost. What remained was what could not be destroyed. Your faith may have been shaken, but it wasn't erased. Your hope may have been bruised, but it wasn't buried. And because something survived the storm, God can now build on it. Restoration beyond loss also means increase. God has a pattern of returning things with multiplication, not because you earned it, but because He is intentional about reminding the enemy that touching God's people always backfires. What was meant to reduce you becomes the reason you expand. What was meant to humiliate you becomes the platform that elevates you. What was meant to end you becomes the evidence that God's hand was on you all along. And when it comes back, you won't cling to it the way you did before. You'll hold it with open hands. You'll appreciate it without idolizing it. You'll enjoy it without fearing its loss. Because restoration beyond loss also restores perspective. You learn that your peace does not come from possessions, positions, or people. It comes from alignment with God. Let me tell you something powerful. God is not intimidated by how much you lost. He is not overwhelmed by how long it's been gone. He is not confused by how complicated the damage looks. What looks irreversible to you is simple to Him. What feels final to you is flexible to Him. He specializes in situations where logic gives up. You may be looking at your life right now and saying, I don't even recognize where I am. But God is saying, good, now you're ready for something you've never had. Because restoration beyond loss does not take you backward. It moves you forward with clarity. And when God restores beyond what you lost, the praise changes. You don't just thank Him for what He gave, you thank Him for what He removed. You don't just celebrate the blessing, you honor the breaking. You don't just rejoice in the open door, you understand the closed ones were necessary. So don't measure your future by your past loss. Don't let yesterday's absence define tomorrow's abundance. Don't assume that because something left, nothing greater can arrive. God is not a recycler of old seasons. He is a creator of new ones. What is coming back will not just fill the space of what was lost, it will stretch wide. Elevate you and require a new level of faith. And when it happens, you will look back and realize that the loss didn't ruin you. It positioned you. God is restoring beyond what you lost. And when it returns, it will prove that the setback was never your sentence, it was your setup. There are moments in life when pain makes you question God's character. You start wondering, if God is good, why did this happen to me? And quietly, without realizing it, you begin to believe that what you lost was taken as punishment, that the door that closed was judgment, that the season that ended was God's way of correcting you. But hear this clearly and let it settle in your spirit. What you lost was not punishment, it was preparation. Punishment pushes you away in shame. Preparation pulls you closer in purpose. And God is not in the business of destroying His children to teach them a lesson. He is in the business of shaping them so they can survive what He has already planned. If the loss was punishment, you would have been left bitter, broken, and abandoned. But the very fact that you are still standing, still praying, still believing, even through tears, is proof that God was working in you, not against you. Preparation is rarely comfortable. It stretches you, humbles you, and forces you to confront parts of yourself you would have ignored if everything had gone right. When things are working, we rarely ask hard questions. Success can hide immaturity. Blessing can cover weakness. Momentum can mask character gaps. So God allows loss not to shame you, but to expose what needs to be strengthened before the next level arrives. Some of what you lost was too small to carry the weight of your destiny. Some of what left was limiting your growth. Some relationships were familiar, but they were keeping you emotionally dependent. Some opportunities were good, but they were not aligned. And God, who sees the end from the beginning, knew that if He let you keep it, it would eventually break you. So He removed it to protect you from a future collapse you couldn't see yet. You thought the loss meant God was disappointed in you. But what if the loss meant God trusted you enough to take you through a refining season? You don't prepare what you plan to discard. You prepare what you intend to promote. The pressure you felt wasn't rejection, it was conditioning. God was building spiritual muscle, emotional endurance, and mental clarity so you wouldn't fold under the blessing that's coming. Think about how preparation works. Athletes train in pain so they can perform under pressure. Gold is heated so impurities rise to the surface. Seeds are buried so roots can grow before anything appears above ground. Preparation often looks like delay, isolation, and discomfort. And if you don't understand the purpose of preparation, you will mislabel the process as punishment. During this season, God taught you things you could never learn in comfort. You learned how to pray when Nobo die claps. You learned how to trust when evidence was missing. You learned how to keep showing up when motivation disappeared. You learned how to listen instead of rushing. You learned discernment the hard way. And while you were asking God to fix the situation, God was quietly fortifying you. Some of the loss stripped you of identity. You didn't just lose a thing, you lost who you thought you were, and that's painful. But sometimes God has to remove the title, the role, the platform, or the relationship so you can meet the real you underneath it all. Because if your identity is attached to something that can be taken, then your confidence will always be fragile. God was preparing you to stand whole even when everything else is shaken. Preparation also teaches obedience. When everything is going well, obedience feels optional. But when things fall apart, obedience becomes essential. You learn to follow God's voice instead of your feelings. You learn to wait instead of forcing doors. You learn that timing matters just as much as talent. And those lessons don't just help you recover, they help you sustain what's coming. The enemy wanted you to believe the loss meant you were disqualified. God wanted you to realize you were being refined. The enemy wanted you to quit. God wanted you to mature. The enemy wanted the pain to harden you. God wanted it to humble you without breaking you. That's why even in your worst moments, something in you refused to give up. Grace was at work, when clarity was missing. Preparation seasons are often quiet seasons. Fewer people call. Less affirmation comes. The spotlight fades. And in that silence, God does some of his deepest work. He teaches you to hear him without noise. He teaches you to value integrity over image. He teaches you to trust process over speed. Because where God is taking you, shortcuts would destroy you. You may not see it yet, but the loss reorganized your priorities. It revealed who was really with you. It showed you where your faith was rooted. It exposed habits that would have sabotaged your future. It slowed you down enough to heal wounds you kept running from. None of that is punishment. That is intentional preparation. And here is the hope that anchors it all. Preparation always precedes promotion. God never elevates what he has not equipped. He never restores what has not been strengthened. When the door opens again, and it will, you will walk through it differently. You won't be desperate. You won't be reckless. You won't be naive. You'll be ready. One day, you'll look back and realize the loss didn't take anything from you that mattered. It removed what was temporary so God could build what was eternal. It broke your dependence on what was unstable and redirected your trust to what is unshakable. So don't wear guilt for a season that was designed to grow you. Don't call punishment what God calls preparation. You were not being corrected. You were being constructed. And what God is preparing you for will require every lesson, every tear, and every moment of endurance you gained along the way. The loss was not the end. It was the training ground. One of the most painful weights a person can carry is the belief that they are too late to recover, too late to start again, too late to become who they were meant to be. Time has a way of accusing us. Every calendar page that turns can feel like a reminder of what didn't happen, what slipped away, what we failed to do when we had the chance. And if you're not careful, you'll begin to believe the lie that because time passed, destiny passed with it. But hear this truth deep in your spirit today. Time lost is not destiny lost. God is not trapped in the limitations of the clock. He is not governed by deadlines, age, or seasons the way we are. What feels delayed to you is not denied to him. You measure life in minutes and years, but God measures it in purpose. And purpose is not erased by delay. Purpose is preserved until the right moment. You may look back and regret years you feel were wasted. Years spent in the wrong relationship, the wrong mindset, the wrong environment, the wrong choices. You replay decisions and wonder how different life would be if you had known then what you know now. But wisdom gained late is not useless. In fact, wisdom gained through pain often becomes the very thing that accelerates your future. God has a unique ability to redeem time. That doesn't mean he rewinds the clock. It means he compresses impact. He can do more in one season of alignment than you could do in 10 seasons of striving. One God-ordered opportunity can restore momentum that took years to lose. One obedient step can unlock doors you thought were permanent. Why closed? Think about this. If time alone determined destiny, then grace would have no power. But grace is God's response to human limitation. Grace fills gaps. Grace covers mistakes. Grace redeems what you couldn't fix on your own. That's why it's never too late when God is involved. The only thing that truly disqualifies a person is refusing to believe again. The enemy wants you stuck in regret. He wants you constantly reviewing your past so you never